I was the third investigator on site, and by the time I arrived the other two had already stopped trying to move the animal. The transport had come down in the Hollow Vale debris field 4 days prior, a civilian survey skimmer, registered to a human family doing geological work under a research permit. 3 adults, 1 juvenile. The hull was split along its dorsal seam, half buried in ash-colored scrub, and every panel of it had been picked clean by scavenger drones before our team got clearance to land. There was no blood. There was no wreckage scatter consistent with impact trauma. There were no bodies. There was a horse. It stood in the lee of the broken hull, hock deep in loose soil, head low, ears swiveling at every sound that came from our direction. A big animal, bay-colored, thick through the chest, the kind of build our zoological briefing called draft-type working stock. It had a halter on, frayed at the cheekpiece, and a lead rope trailing 12 meters behind it that ended in nothing. No stake, no anchor, nothing holding it there except itself. "It's been like that since we arrived," said Vantel, the junior surveyor, when I climbed down from the shuttle. He kept a respectful 8 meters between himself and the animal at all times. "We tried to herd it off-site twice. Tranquilizer wouldn't take, metabolizes too fast, our toxicologist says. We tried walking it out on a long pole lead. It just stops, plants all 4 feet and stops. It's not aggressive, it's just immovable." I looked at the wreck, then at the horse, then back at the wreck. "Has it eaten anything you've left out?" "No, it drinks from the runoff pool over there," Vantel pointed. "Otherwise it just stands. Sometimes it walks the perimeter of the hull, always comes back to that spot." He hesitated. "Sir, with respect, the family is gone. There's nothing here to guard. We've run thermal, ground-penetrating scan, atmospheric trace. 4 adults and a juvenile do not vanish without residue. I don't think there's anyone left to find." I had read his report on the shuttle down. I had also read the report from the team before him, and the one before that. 3 rotations of investigators, each one more confident than the last that the case was a dead end. Predator activity, most likely, despite the absence of any predator markings consistent with regional fauna, despite the fact that nothing in this biome was large enough or bold enough to take down 4 humans and leave no trace. I walked toward the horse. Vantel made a small sound of protest behind me, the kind species make when they expect their superior to do something unwise. The horse watched me come. It didn't startle, didn't shy. Its ears tracked me the way a sentry's eyes track an approaching figure, assessing, not afraid. I stopped 4 meters out, well within what should have been a flight trigger distance for a 400-kilogram prey animal with no defensive adaptations beyond running. It didn't run. It lowered its head another few centimeters and exhaled through its nose, long and slow, the way our xenobiologists described as a calming signal in herd animals. Then it turned its head deliberately, unmistakably, toward the underside of the wreck, where the hull had crumpled inward and left a low, dark gap between scorched plating and packed earth. I had been an investigator for 11 cycles. I had learned, in that time, never to ignore the thing a creature points at when it has no language to tell you directly. "Get the cutting torch," I said, "and the deep scanner, the handheld unit, not the one we used for the surface sweep." "Sir, we already ran ground penetrating." "At standard depth for standard density. Run it again. Adjust for void pockets under compacted debris." I didn't look away from the horse. Something is keeping that animal in exactly this spot for 4 days with no food incentive and no herd to protect. I want to know what. It took 90 minutes to clear the gap beneath the hull plating. The horse did not interfere. It also did not leave. It stood at the edge of the cleared space the entire time, watching the work with an attention that I can only describe, and I am aware of how this will read in a formal report as supervisory. Beneath the plating, in a crawlspace the original impact had crushed nearly flat, we found the juvenile. Alive. Dehydrated, fevered from an infected leg wound, but alive, tucked into a gap barely wide enough for a human child to fit, insulated from the cold by what our medic later identified as horsehair, shed and packed deliberately around the small body like bedding. The child told us, once she could speak, that the adults had gone for help on foot 2 days after the crash, when the horse refused to let any of them near the rest of the wreckage. Refused, specifically, in a way that herded them bodily away from a slow leak in the skimmer's coolant system that the family hadn't detected, and that would have killed anyone who stayed near the hull. The horse, she said, had pushed her into the gap with its nose before the leak worsened, had stood over the opening since, had not let the scavenger drones near it, had not let anything near it. She did not know if her parents had made it anywhere. That part of the story remains open. Search teams are still out. But I keep returning to the 4 days. The animal had no rational incentive to remain. It was not native to this world, was not bonded to this terrain, had no pack, no herd, no human voice giving it commands it could follow. Every behavioral model in our database predicts that a creature in its position, frightened, food-deprived, isolated, abandons a fixed point and seeks safety on its own terms within the first 36 hours. It stood for 4 days over a hole in the ground because something small and helpless was inside it, and leaving was never on the list of things it considered. When the medical shuttle came for the child, the horse tried to follow her up the ramp. It took 2 of us and a length of rope to convince it that she would not be harmed in our care, and even then it planted itself at the base of the ramp and would not move further than that, watching until the hatch sealed. I have filed this under anomalous loyalty behavior, species, equus, origin, scifi. I am aware that designation undersells what I watched happen in that debris field. I do not have a better one. Humans, when asked about it later, used a phrase that does not translate cleanly into any administrative category we maintain. She wouldn't leave the wreck because she wasn't done. We have no equivalent classification for a creature that simply refuses to be finished with its job. I am beginning to suspect we will need one.